Welcome, everyone. My name is Meg Olson, and I am the Grassroots Mobilization Director here at Network. We are so excited to have you join us for our webinar this evening, The Deep Need for Repair, Unpacking the 2022 Congressional Voting Record. Since we opened our doors in April of 1972, Network has been publishing a voting record every January so that we, our members and supporters, and our partners can hold Congress accountable for their commitment to dismantling systemic racism, helping families and communities thrive, and advancing the common good. So if you do the math, our 2022 voting record is our 50th one. You will hear more about this later from my colleagues on the government relations team, but I am excited to say that this year we have 270 members of Congress who voted with Network 100% of the time, 222 representatives, and 48 senators. And special congratulations to Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island for having their entire state delegations receive a 100%. Folks who live in those states will have quite a few Network 100% certificates to deliver. Before we take a look at our agenda for the evening and I introduce our speakers, I'm going to do a little tech housekeeping. First, we have closed captions available if you would like them. They are auto-generated and definitely imperfect, but you may turn them on by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. Towards the end of the webinar, we will have time for Q&A. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to type your questions into the Q&A box. This will allow us to follow up with you if we need to give you more information or if we don't have time to answer your questions. You can also use this box for help with tech, and Sister Eilish will hopefully be able to help you. So here's our agenda for our time together. First, Mary Novak will talk to us about the hard work of transforming our politics. Then members of our government relations team will do a legislative look back at 2022, which was the second session of the 117th Congress. And we'll have a discussion about what Network scored in the voting record. And finally, Catherine will talk about how to deliver the voting record to your members of Congress. So you'll notice that there's not really anything here about the 118th Congress on our agenda. I know you're all very curious and excited to talk about the upcoming year with us, so we'll be hosting a whole other webinar in March, after you've delivered the voting record to your members of Congress, and the new members are fully staffed up, both on the Hill and in district. And now I would like to introduce you to our speakers. First, we'll have Mary Novak, our Executive Director. Then Laura Peralta-Schulte, our Senior Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs. Then Jarrett K. Smith, Government Relations Specialist. Then Ronnate Asirwatham, our Government Relations Director. Then Minister Christian S. Watkins, Government Relations Specialist. And Catherine Gillette, our Grassroots Mobilization Coordinator. And now it is my great pleasure to hand it over to Network's Executive Director, Mary Novak. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thanks, Meg, and greetings, friends, and Happy New Year. Congratulations to each and every one of you. The release of our 2022 voting record marks another year of your faithful, committed advocacy for justice. At every turn, the network community was strategic, active, and engaged in 2022. Thank you for all of the ways you took action with the network community in the past year. As Meg said, Network has a long tradition of preparing a voting record. This is one of the most consistent exercises in our political ministry. And we do this to make clear how our democracy is working or how it might not be, and to put in concrete terms what we say during election season. Who we elect matters. 2022 was a deeply consequential year for our politics. And you're about to hear all of the wonderful, wonky details from my beloved colleagues. But first, I want to touch on 3 points to emphasize the importance of this political ministry at this current point in time. Heads up, the first 2 are challenging, but the third is hopeful. First, last year, we continued to see politicians, religious leaders, YouTubers, and other talking heads distort and exploit Christian language, Christian symbols, and Christian imagery for political gain. I'm talking here about Christian nationalism, and more specifically, white Christian nationalism. The unifying power of Christian nationalism is well described and addressed in a report on Christian nationalism in the January 6th insurrection, published last year by our great colleagues over at the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That report, which I encourage everyone to read, and there's going to be a link in the chat, it revealed that, quote, the groups were diverse, but it was Christian nationalism that united them, unquote. More than a year after the violent January 6th insurrection, we continued experiencing the damaging impact of white Christian nationalism on our politics and our elections. Now, let's be clear, election denialism is really an attempt to overthrow elections. It came into play in several midterm races, and legislatively, we saw elected officials pushing political agendas driven by culture war wedge issues to the detriment of the common good. The rise of Christian nationalism is a dangerous threat to our democracy that we must continue to address. More on that as the year unfolds. Second, in 2022, we saw political leaders dehumanizing specific individuals and communities for political gain, and too often, tragedy resulted. Groups subject to dehumanizing rhetoric and actions included election officials, a Supreme Court nominee, school board members, immigrants and asylum seekers, our Jewish friends and neighbors, and the transgender community. We saw political violence targeting Paul Pelosi and Justice Brett Kavanaugh, an FBI office in Ohio, a Texas synagogue, and a community Pride in Park event in Idaho. We saw radicalized individuals shoot and kill Black grocery shoppers in a Buffalo supermarket, undocumented immigrants on the border, and patrons at Club Q. This widespread denial of human dignity in our society simply cannot continue. More on that in the coming year as well. But now to my third point, and a hopeful one. Last year, we saw people come together and unleash their power to build a just and inclusive multiracial democracy. During the midterm elections, people across the country, especially people of faith, became involved as election workers and poll watchers to make sure every voter could cast their vote freely and safely. And in order to protect our democracy, many of you went to the polls as multi-issue Pope Francis voters. Thank you for that. You also showed up for not just one, but 2 events to learn about white supremacy and American Christianity. And throughout the summer and the fall, you organized vigils to pray and act in support of establishing a reparations commission to name and address our country's sin of slavery and continued racism. And even in Congress, we saw a significant amount of bipartisan legislation in both chambers, a testament to the senators and representatives who made the courageous and bold choice to vote yes on legislation that would improve the lives of their constituents instead of reverting back to partisan gridlock. Speaking of legislation, it's almost time for me to hand you over to my colleague, Laura Peralta-Schulte, Network's Senior Director of Public Policy and Government Relations. But before Laura begins, I want to thank you again for your support of Network and underscore the importance of my colleagues taking this time to create and go over the voting record. To make our democracy stronger, we need to really dig into what happened last year and learn from it so we can go forward this year even stronger. If you find the voting record useful or the other tools and resources we provide, please consider becoming an actual Network member if you are not already. And if you are, please consider supporting our work with a one-time donation. Our power comes from you, the Network community. Thank you. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Mary. Following you and the framing, what a beautiful reminder of why it is that we do the work that we do. So just picking up where Mary left in her third point, the 117th Congress in total, and last year in particular, offered great promise and was deeply frustrating. When we talk about progress, again, we're talking about the bipartisan bills that Mary discussed earlier, and which my colleagues will go into the nitty-gritty of what those bills entailed. But I want to spend just 2 minutes or so to talk about some of the big takeaways. So while there was historic gains, the frustration really came, I think, for many of us and for many of you, just recognizing that politics is ultimately about math and coalition building. And where we were not able to make progress in areas of law that we all care very deeply about had a lot to do with the fact that we had very tight margins in both the House and in the Senate, and that oftentimes it was the lack of consensus, whether it was a Democratic-only bill and not being able to keep Mr. Manchin on board for expanding the child tax credit, or democracy reform and trying to do more bold pieces on a bipartisan bill. It is always how good can you build a coalition that sets the basis. I think one of the very good takeaways we can also take from the 117th, and it is a strength that we will build on, is that the Democratic leadership in both the House, Senate, and the Biden administration on many, many, many of our priorities had our back. This is not to suggest that they are perfect. And again, you'll hear from my colleagues about places we have to push them to do better. But what I will say is, many times the priorities, the key priorities that we're pushing really reflected our priorities. That's both an opportunity and a challenge, because where we need to build is to make sure we've got good Republican champions on many of the issues we work. I just have to say it and can't say it enough, that our work is only possible because of your work. In terms of politics in Washington, D.C., it is reactive, not proactive. And so it is really your work that helps us put issues over the finish line. Let me draw a few lessons, really with a mind towards the future, but lessons that we learned in 2022. So in terms of lesson one, the need to plant seeds early and often. Oftentimes, as you hopefully you've seen throughout the 117th Congress, we came to you once, twice, 3 times. and asked you to weigh in. That is because it is critical that it's not a one and done situation, but that there are multiple touches depending on the time. That is particularly true in what we call must pass legislation, like appropriations, funding the government. And so again, look forward to this year. We will be touching you sometimes multiple times on the same issue to get it over the finish line. I think that one of the lessons that we learned as well is we need to look for opportunities in each and every bill to try to score a victory. As again, my colleagues will describe, many of our victories were not passed in single issue bills. They were tucked into big, complex bills. And that is a very productive strategy for us. Somewhere we're going to be pivoting again as we move forward in this contentious Congress. But looking for opportunities outside of freestanding bills it worked for us in 2022, and we're going to continue. The third lesson is really about bipartisanship, because as Mary said at the beginning, it was beautiful that you had the coalescing of members, particularly in the Senate, around key issues. Were the bills perfect from our perspective? No, but they made progress. We had the good fortune in the 117th Congress of having the Dems control the White House in both chambers, and still there were limits. Again, I can only echo back to Joe Manchin saying no to so many of our priorities and Build Back Better. Now is the time, and really as we move forward, to make sure we are touching base early and often with both sides of the aisle. I'd say one of the most interesting learnings that we had last year too is that we can actually work with organizations that are very different from ourselves. We've done this in the past in things like criminal justice reform. We did it last year on a number of our bills, and that was a very strategic activity. So that is a learning. Let's see if we can do it. And when all else fails, the key is really to pivot for success. And Christian's going to walk you through an example of how a pivot to the administration made a big difference on one of the bills that we've been working on. So we are happy you're here tonight. With no more pause, I'm going to go ahead and shift the focus to Ronnate, my faithful colleague on government relations, who is going to walk you through the next section of our work and our victories last year.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for that introduction. And can we have the next slide, please? So when you looked at the voting record, you might have thought that you had worked on many more bills than what was scored. And what happened? What happened was that we do not score every win. There are two main reasons for this. One is that the bill is too big. As Laura was saying, it is complex and is a basket of both good and bad. And the second is when we ask you to go on the defense. We ask you to call your congressperson to vote no. And the congressperson does vote no. So that is a win. But then the bill has either been killed or an amendment has been killed, which again is a good move and what we wanted. But it's just very hard to score. So let me get into this a little more. Next slide, please. So all these green ticks that you see on this slide are all the wins that were not scored. Take a moment to take a good look and take in all your good work and all the wins that were accomplished in 2022. But now we have to look at all the little red X's on the side at the bottom right hand of the list. That's where all the losses were in the bill. All these wins and losses are in one bill, the omnibus bill that passed with one vote. Next slide, please. Therefore, it's a bit complicated. If we deliver the voting record and say, thank you for voting for the omnibus, are we thanking them for voting for the Pregnant Voters Fairness Act? Or are we thanking them for not voting on DACA protections. That's something that we wanted. So as I said, it's complicated, and that's why we don't score it. But yet, a win is a win. And for that, we are grateful for all your work. And let me give you an example. So let's take the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. You all know about it. We know that you have all been working on LTEs on that. And in December, when the omnibus, the day before the omnibus was coming in for a vote, on 5 p.m., we looked at the bill and we did not see the text of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. We knew we were told it's going to be there, but it wasn't there. And on the last day of the 117th Congress, at 5 p.m., we thought we had lost. It was over. But then, a little after midnight, it was introduced as an amendment, just as they were taking up this bill to vote. It was introduced as an amendment as a part of the omnibus. It passed. Schumer made a floor speech, and we had won. So all of the many, many LTEs that you all wrote, the full-page advertisements that we had in the New York Times and other places, every time the New York team followed Kathleen's advice saying, knock on Schumer's door, we need to ask him to do what he promised, or no, give him some love, give him some space. All of that advice, all of your actions, it all came to pass on a little after midnight on the 21st of December, 2022. So all of your work is really important, even if we don't score the wins. Let me get to the second part of the wins that we don't score, and that is the defensive wins. So as I said, these are the ones that we don't want in. We're working really hard to make sure that this does not become law. So usually these are amendments or bills that we don't want. And the big example of this is the codification of the Title 42 expulsion policy. It happened both during the time of the Inflation Reduction Act as well as the Omnibus. And by August of 2022, when the Inflation Reduction Act came up, we had been working on this. We had been working against the Title 42 expulsion policy for more than a year and a half. But yet we knew it would be coming up as an amendment. So we really worked, again, with your help, excuse me, the many letters and meetings y'all had with Senator Menendez, Senator Padilla, Senator Durbin. And very early on, 2 days before the vote came up, we had Senator Menendez and Senator Padilla come out and say, if there's this amendment, if this amendment passes, we will not vote for the final bill in the Inflation Reduction Act. This was a huge victory. And once we got that, then Senator Booker came on and we started getting all these people. And we were like, very happy. On the day of the vote, again, this was going to happen at night. And we knew we were very happy. We were in a good place. We got Senator Hickenlooper from Colorado. It was fun. Then at 10:30 at night, it all happens at night, 10:30 at night on the day of the voting for the IRA, we hear that Senator Kaine is not there. And I know, again, Catherine reached out to the Virginia team. We got calls in. We got people to keep calling and writing. And again, we thought, okay, we're in a good place. It's going to go through. And at this time, there's at least 60 advocates, immigrant advocates on the Zoom call, watching C-SPAN, talking to staff. It's all happening. And then 2:45, the amendment comes by. The parliamentarian says, it's 2:45 in the morning. The parliamentarian says, it only needs 50 votes. After a year of saying that immigration is not relevant, and now for reconciliation, now it only needs 50 votes. We thought we were in a really bad place, but again, all of what we did, all of the work of getting this together, making sure that we held with our senators, push back on them, make sure that our champions were our champions, that vote failed. As of today, Title 42 is not yet codified. The same thing happened in December, and we were ready. We were ready only because of your work. And that is why all of those work, again, we don't score. because all this work goes into these few moments at night. Let me tell you, the life of the policy advocate, the nightlife is wild in this town, but it's because of all your work that we are able to get this done. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague Jarrett to talk about the wins that we did score. Over to you, Jarrett.
Thank you, Ronnate. It's great to be with you this evening. First, I will go through, just list briefly all the bills that we scored. There were a total of 13 bills, 5 in the House, or 8 in the House and 5 in the Senate. Some of those bills included the Freedom to Vote, John R. Lewis Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment Expungement, MORE Act, the Collective Bargaining for House Staffers, Restoring Hope for Mental Health and Well-Being, Respect for Marriage Act, the Supreme Court Security Funding Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Presidential Election Reform Act. Those were the bills that we scored in the House in the 2022 session. Over in the Senate, we scored the Freedom to Vote, the John R. Lewis Act. What is unique here is we scored the confirmation of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. In the Senate, the senators have the right, the responsibility to confirm Supreme Court justices. That right is not something House members have. Supreme Court Security Funding Act, once again, found its way to the Senate. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Respect for Marriage Act. So let me step back and talk about, if we can go back a slide, and talk about some of these really important, impactful bills. Let's start with the Respect for Marriage Act. That bill was brought forward primarily because of a statement by one of the Supreme Court justices that future cases that the court would hear that were settled using the 14th Amendment would be taken up by this court, not this session, maybe in a future session, and there was a very good chance that those cases would be thrown out. And one of those cases is same-sex marriage. So the House and the Senate came together and they codified same-sex marriage in this incredible bill. And it was a bipartisan bill in the Senate. It passed 61 to 36. That is just unbelievable. Another bill that I want to mention is the Inflation Reduction Act. That was, like my colleague Ronnate said, it was a very, very big bill. It primarily started as the Build Back Better bill, but we could not get that over the finish line because Senator Manchin said that he did not support it. So through Leader Schumer, a lot of work was put into coming up with an alternative, and that alternative is the Inflation Reduction Act. This bill is just one, looking back in history, we will say that this is one of the most important bills that Congress has passed in probably a generation. So if you bear with me, I just have some prepared remarks I'd like to give. A crowning achievement of the 117th Congress was the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act in this past August. This bill included many priorities for President Biden's original Build Back Better bill, although some, like paid family medical leave, restoring the child tax credit, and closing the Medicaid coverage gap, did not make the cut. Inflation Reduction Act takes action to reverse trickle-down tax policy. It cuts the cost of drug prices for seniors. And you see there's a cap on insulin at $35. And it requires, this is huge, requires drug companies to negotiate prices for Medicare and increases subsidies for working people so they can afford health care through the Affordable Care Act. That was something that here at Network we advocated for. It's very important, especially because of the pandemic. And the pandemic is still going on. And for very low income people, it is still a burden. And having these healthcare subsidies is critical. The Inflation Reduction Act provides significant investment into domestic energy production while promoting clean energy. And then finally, the Presidential Election Reform Act. The Electoral Reform Act found its way in the omnibus bill. We have been advocating for that with your support, and we were able to get this in the initial text that came out for the omnibus bill. You know, there are only a few must-pass bills in the Congress. An appropriations bill and National Defense Authorization Act are those two big bills. And, you know, at Network, we strive to come up with strategies and tactics to find out ways that we can make sure that our priorities, the things that you are advocating for in your local districts and here in DC, so that we can make sure that these issues, these public policy priorities are in these bills. So once we look back on 2022, I think we're going to say that, you know, this was some incredible legislative work. We're not done. You heard the list of things like the child tax credit that we continue to advocate for, but this was very, very satisfying to see some of the things that we were able to accomplish. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I would now like to turn to my colleague and friend, Minister Christian Watkins. Thank you. You're on mute, Christian.
Thank you, Jarrett, for that introduction, and for you all meeting here with us. We are thankful that you all have continued to ride with us, to advocate with us, and to continue for the struggle for justice. Now, next slide, please. At this point of the juncture, I want to discuss the journey ahead in 2023. The not yet successful legislative advocacy campaigns that we have fearlessly engaged in over the years, and what our plans are moving forward. So we are grateful that Congress passed the Electoral Count Reform Act as part of the omnibus appropriations legislation at the end of last year. That passage of that bill helps ensure the transition efforts and can move forward from one president to another, from one administration to another, even in the event of a close or contested election. Additionally, it provides $75 million across the nation for election security grants for local and state municipalities. This was great news, especially in my portfolio of democracy reform. However, given the lingering effects of the January 6th insurrection, the right-wing assault on voting rights continues in courts and legislative houses nationwide. At least 21 conservative-led states legislatures have enacted 42 laws restricting access to voting since early 2021. And they are still legislating changes, including gerrymandering district and legislative maps, creating obstacles to registration, cutting back on early and mail-in voting efforts and polling locations, and enacting strict voter identification law requirements. Due to these efforts and the pending 2 Supreme Court cases and the plethora of state court cases across the country, we must remain deeply committed to fighting for robust voting rights legislation until justice is won. Now, as far as the Equal Act is concerned, many of you engaged in advocacy days for 2 years. And despite our robust advocacy efforts, the Equal Act failed to be included in the must-pass legislation at the 11th hour, blocked by opposition in late-night negotiations. The Senate Democrats held the line at sentencing disparity elimination, so Grassley's Smart Cocaine Sentencing Act failed to be included as well. Because of the strong desire for incremental reform by the administration, a strong pivot surprisingly occurred. And Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a new Department of Justice directive for federal prosecutors to utilize more just and equitable prosecutorial methods likened to the Equal Act moving forward. But since we know that no rule is safe until it's codified in law, our efforts for sentencing reforms will continue. As I was explained earlier, the child tax credit was not included in the omnibus package at the end of the year. The expanded refundable child tax credit succeeded at reducing child poverty. The United States child poverty rate fell 46% to its lowest level in 2021, according to the United States Census Bureau. The temporary credit lifted nearly 4 million children out of poverty and reduced the number of households that reported not having enough food. The expanded benefit delivered more money to 61 million children in 36 million households and reached even the poorest families who didn't qualify for before because they had no income. And the monthly payments allowed families to afford essentials, including groceries, rent, and clothing, researchers found. So we're grateful for your ongoing efforts in past years, and we're looking forward to this year and beyond. But sadly, the end of the year spending bill did not include the expanded tax credit nor the earned income tax credit. We just didn't have the legislative firepower to build consensus in Congress to pass a final clean bill. The good news is that our champions went to the mat on this, and the corporate tax breaks weren't included either. So that's a win. This sets us up for major possibilities for passage in 2023. Now, as my dear colleague, Ronnate, eloquently explained, the DACA protections and other immigration policies were not included in either of the final end of the year bills, must-pass bills. But Network has long worked to protect DACA and Dreamers, and we couldn't get it in this legislation this last year. But this year, we hope to try a two-pronged approach of legislation and administrative action to see if we can get the job done. And finally, for HR 40 Reparations Commission, reparations is an issue that is difficult for some Democrats and all Republicans to consider. Our conversations here on Capitol Hill and our meetings with several staffers have proven that. The legislation in Congress is what is proposed by executive order, is only the authorization of a commission to study the issue of reparations and make recommendations to the president and to Congress. The legislation will be introduced by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, my home state, in the 118th Congress very soon. There is a push to get co-sponsors for the House and Senate bills. However, the best advocacy option that we have now is to press upon the President Biden to enact HR 40 through executive order. He has the authority to do so, and given the political climate in Congress, it's our current best option. So look forward to receiving more information on that. So, beloved, the struggle continues. Your advocacy work has helped shape narratives and definitely empowers our work here at Network on Capitol Hill. The publication rates for letters to the editors were about 85% this past year, compared to maybe 20 or 30% in past years. And as a United Methodist on the team, I want to personally thank you all for participating in the United Methodist Baptismal Covenant of accepting the freedom and power that God gives you to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. So, beloved, don't grow weary in doing good, for in due time, we will reap the harvest if we don't give up. The field is ripe, and our communal work continues. And I pass it over to my colleague, Catherine, now.
Thanks so much, Christian. And hello, everyone. First, allow me to add my thanks for your being here or watching the recording. We are so grateful for your support of Network and our annual voting record. Now that you've learned all about it, we would love your help delivering the 2022 voting record to your elected officials. For that, you are going to have 3 options. Your first option is to set up a meeting with the state director or district director. And we really do want these meetings to be at the state or district level, not the DC staff, because that is where the really good relationship building occurs. Either virtual or in person is fine. Do whatever your group and the staff member are comfortable with. So the first option is those meetings. The second option is to arrange a drop-off of the voting record at the office nearest to you. And so that is just showing up at the office, dropping it off, talking to a staffer. It's not necessarily a meeting. It's not like a sit down, but it's a little shorter. And your third option is to email the voting record to the district office. Again, we really want to make sure we are reaching out to that local district or state level staff, not the DC staff, because we really want to be building good relationships with them. Keep in mind, whatever method you choose, you are going to want to call the member's district office ahead of time to schedule the meeting or obtain the correct email address. As much as possible, we don't want to just be sending it to like a general account. We really want to direct these emails to a specific staff member, to a specific person, so we can get that relationship building going. And we want to help ensure that your encounter is as effective as possible. Next slide. So, what are the steps leading up to these deliveries? First, we do hope that you will invite other advocates to join you. Think about who in your congregation, your parish, your local justice group, your family, your friend group, your network advocates team might want to join you for this delivery of the voting record. Second, and perhaps most important, please do be sure to let us know if you plan to help with the delivery by filling out our voting record delivery commitment form on our website. We are going to include the link in our follow-up email, so just keep an eye out for that, and please do fill that out as quickly as possible. By signing up for the delivery, by letting us know that you plan to do this, it really helps us to ensure that you have everything that you need. We can assist you with specific messaging for your particular members of Congress. We can provide you with certificates for the folks who scored 100%. And it really does help us to connect you with other advocates from your state or district. If 5 people from your district all sign up saying you want to make a delivery, we want to connect you. We want you to be able to collaborate and go together because we think there's a lot of power in numbers and in collaboration. And so third, you are going to want to download a copy of the voting record to share at your meeting, to use on your delivery, your drop-off, or to share via email. So making sure you've got a copy from our website of that voting record is really important. And finally, we hope you will report back and let us know how your delivery went. How did the staffer respond? What did you learn from your conversation? What did you learn from your time together? And we do hope you will take some pictures of the delivery, whether that's in person, whether that is an online delivery, whether that's you standing outside the office holding up the voting record. It's really fun to have pictures of these deliveries. But I will say, we do want to make sure we're asking the staffers permission to make sure they're comfortable with that if they're going to be in the pictures. So please do share those pictures with us afterwards. And we will have a form on our website for the follow-up, so you can report back through our website as well. Next slide. All right, so you have signed up for your delivery, you're ready to participate. What is it you're gonna say? If they scored 100%, that is fantastic. Be sure to thank them and give them that 100% voter certificate. Staffers really love their certificates, members really love those certificates. It's not unusual to see one taped to the wall. People get really excited about their certificates. Be sure to express your gratitude for specific areas of support. And we do encourage you to focus heavily on the Inflation Reduction Act. As you heard from our government relations team, that was a huge accomplishment. And so we really do want to lift that up. If you have a personal story related to the Inflation Reduction Act, we encourage you to pass that along because staffers and members are definitely hungry for that kind of information right now. And finally, we encourage you to share a little bit about the legislation that we still need. So talking about the expanded child tax credit, the Equal Act, some of those voting rights pieces of legislation. and the Presidential Election Reform Act, and your hopes for their ongoing support of Network's policy agenda. Next slide. If they passed but didn't quite get 100%, you can absolutely thank them for where they did vote with Network. You definitely want to lift up the positive. You want to lift up where they did collaborate with us and encourage them to continue doing so. This is an opportunity to say, you know, we really appreciated you voting for X, Y, and Z, and we hope that you will continue to support similar policies in this new Congress. And also, you might ask how you can support them. If they failed, if they did not get 100%, if they did not even pass, it's okay to express disappointment. We certainly are disappointed that some of these folks voted against our values, but we want to make sure that our tone is polite and hopeful. We want to collaborate with these folks moving forward. We want to explore opportunities to work together and build anew. And then lastly, some of you have members who we scored who are no longer in Congress. If that is the case, you are not going to make a delivery. There's not going to be somewhere to deliver this voting record to. However, if they did score 100%, you could write a letter to the editor giving them a huge shout out and thanking them for their good work. If they scored less than 100%, it's probably not particularly strategic to engage, so I wouldn't worry so much about that. But if they did get 100%, you can give them all the praise and perhaps even say, you know, you did a great job, we are so grateful, and we hope that your replacement is going to continue to share these values and continue to do this good work. All right, so I think that covers it for deliveries. I really do hope that you will strongly consider signing up and helping out. Deliveries are a wonderful opportunity for you to grow in relationship with your elected official and also help lift up Network in our policy agenda. And so now I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Meg Olson. She was having some tech issues. We'll see if she's back or not.
I am back. And I'm going to invite all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much to turn your cameras back on. Colin, one of our tech masters, you can unshare your screen so we can see everyone. Catherine, stay on because I have lots of questions about the actual delivery, which is great. All right. So a couple of questions. We get this every year, and I'm going to pitch this over to Laura. How does it help if we do outreach when our members of Congress are reliably progressive?
Okay, thank you, Meg, for that one. And I saw two names in there, both Representative Liu from California and Representative Bauman. So I just want to say it is absolutely important for Network members back home to touch base with folks that consistently get 100% for two reasons. One is the power of the network, as I think we've all said, does not come from Washington, it comes from home. So when a member knows that they've got network members in their district, it is so advantageous in terms of setting up their priorities. There are so many issues that any one member can work on. And so we want to make sure that the issues we care about are elevated. By the way, Mr. Liu is a new member of the Democratic Leadership Caucus. He is the highest ranking Asian American ever to serve in the House. He is a go-to guy on a judiciary. And I see there's an immigration reform conversation. So there, Mr. Bowman has already, through the good work of my colleague, Jarrett Smith, been to an event with us on housing, building again the relationship in New York. Way to go, team. So yes, touch base with your members, get that relationship. It's something that is important for home and that we can leverage here.
Thanks, Laura. And I think you bring up an important point. You don't know when someone's going to move into leadership or when they're going to take a committee chair. And so to have that relationship in place, regardless of how much they're voting with us, is so important. So.
And if I can add, Meg, it's really good to have members that are very supportive of our issues to talk to their colleagues, especially those colleagues that may not be very supportive It's very powerful if a member will do a dear colleague letter. So the business of the House and the Senate is done behind closed doors, places that lobbyists cannot get to. And so it's really good when we can get members to take our issues into those arenas and advocate.
Thanks, Jarrett. Catherine, let's get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of actually delivering the voting record. We have a lot of lovely folks here who this might be their first time, or they don't know if there's anyone else in their district. How do they connect with other network folks? Can you maybe walk us through that one more time?
Yes, absolutely. So the first step, again, is going to be signing up on our website saying, yes, I am interested in helping to deliver Network's 2022 voting record. Once you fill out that form, we're going to be kind of keeping track of who is signing up in which state and which district. And we are going to be connecting you. We're going to be saying, hey, somebody from California 22 wants to deliver a voting record. Oh, wait, there's a couple of other folks from that same district. Let's connect them by email. And so we'll do our best to get you all connected. And if we notice, oh, hey, there's only one person signed up from this district, we might reach out to you and say, do you have folks that you would like to bring along? Or would you like us to reach out to other folks in your district? Because we have a whole database of folks in each district, and we can reach out to them and say, there's one person in your district who would like to deliver the voting record. Would you be interested in tagging along and kind of being a part of a group? And in the past, we've had pretty good success with people responding to those emails saying, yes, thank you so much. I so appreciate being asked. And so as much as possible, we will try to connect you with other network advocates. But also, we certainly encourage you to invite people in your own network. So if you have folks who share networks values, share our commitment to Catholic social teaching, Catholic social justice, we encourage you to invite them in and encourage them to participate. So I think either you can get connected with folks or we can help you get connected with folks. But that's definitely the first step, kind of figuring out who your group is, and then reaching out to the office and saying, we would like to either have a meeting or stop by and do a drop off, or even just, I would like to email the appropriate staffer a copy of this. Who is the district director? Who is the state director who I could be in contact with to share this great resource with them? Because as much as possible, we do want to be meeting with those folks, again, at the state or district level. And so figuring out who you need to meet with, getting that meeting or that drop-off set up, and then participating. I think you heard a lot of great information from our team here, but just sharing the voting record, lifting up the really exciting parts, lifting up the work that we need to continue doing, and having a conversation, building that relationship.
Absolutely. One more question about the actual delivery. As you and I have talked, and our whole grassroots mobilization team has talked about this, there's been a lot of redistricting this year. What should folks do if they had a member of Congress for so long and now they don't have them anymore?
Yeah, so I think, again, it depends if that person is still in Congress. If they are continuing to serve, but in a different district, I do think if they're like somebody who got 100% and you had a great relationship with them, you could absolutely reach out, show them the voting record, deliver a certificate and say thank you. If it's somebody who maybe didn't score 100%, they're not going to really care about what people who aren't their constituents have to say. I think that's fair to say. But if it's a 100%er who you had a great relationship with, by all means, lift them up, but then also pivot to your new district and make sure you're building a relationship there, because we definitely want to build that new relationship moving forward.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And especially for those, I have a few questions. I got some in the email earlier about my member of Congress is new. We're going to wait a little bit, let them get their office set up, and then we'll have plenty of materials for you to deliver, in a month or two. So hang tight for new members. I know we're eager to meet them. All right, just looking a little bit. We have lots of questions about upcoming thoughts, hopes, wishes. Two about our favorite topic, Ronnate, immigration reform. Is there any hope?
Well, there's always hope, I think. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. But we're focusing on, again, as we had mentioned, we're focusing on both, trying to get as much protections as possible, and then trying to stave away the bad policies. So at this point, we would have heard about the Dreamers and the DACA protections. That's something that we're focusing on. And many people have asked about, what about immigration reform? Is that something that we're hoping for, or would it be small? There is a lot of talk that there'll be a big immigration reform. We will, it's constantly watching and seeing how this goes and being nimble. Either we are ready to push for a big immigration reform if that's what will happen, or otherwise we're again ready to make sure that we will push for piecemeal little pieces, protection for Dreamers, etc. So it's still a little too early to say. We know that there's a lot of immigration is going to be really high up there, again, as to make sure that there'll be a lot of negative immigration coming up. We know that there's a bill coming up on Monday that's, again, a piecemeal messaging bill that says, ban asylum. And so there's going to be a lot of negative immigration bills. That's one thing that we will be defending. So that is what we are looking at both right now. What's the big picture? What can we get done? And how can we get it done?
Great. All right. Another big issue, Christian, is voting rights, and specifically the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
I would have to say that I agree with my colleague Ronnate, and saying that there is legislative appetite on both sides of the aisle, one more so than the other, to get some robust legislation passed. However, because of extenuating circumstances and because of certain caucuses in Congress on both sides of the chambers, in both chambers, it might be a little bit harder to get a full bill passed. So we'll be doing whatever we can. We'll be doing whatever we can, advocating for however we can to get provisions passed in this upcoming Congress, So stay tuned. I'm pretty sure you're gonna be hearing from me a lot.
I think so. And Jarrett, this came through this morning in my email, but what more can we do? This is from someone who, went to a vigil this past year and signed letters. What more can we do for reparations?
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, whomever sent in the question. Right now, it is all about the White House. We need to put the pressure on the president to sign an executive order. And that includes calling, sending emails, having members in your parish, in your community, send emails to get this policy across the finish line. It is going to require action by the President of the United States. There is precedent for this. It's not like the president can't do this. We just got to give him the push, so to speak, so that he takes out his pen and signs an executive order. But it's advocacy. It's grassroots advocacy. People that care about this issue, that want to see this happen, have to let their voices be heard and make sure that the White House president and the vice president see those emails and those phone calls.
Great. I know we have a few more questions that we're not going to be able to answer since we're hitting the 8 o'clock hour here. I know, Catherine, you had one more thing you wanted to say, though, about deliveries.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, if this is your first time, or if you've done this 100 times, 50 times, we're only at 50, we are here for you. We are here for you. So just send us your questions. We're happy to walk you through the process, talk you through the process. The whole Grassroots Mobilization team is here to support you. So you got questions, just let us know.
Absolutely. We'll do some congressional district matchmaking as well. All right. So a few exciting things coming up in the future. So, all right, we have two upcoming events. One is very soon on Monday evening. It is our January community conversations. We're going to be featuring an amazing truth teller that my colleague Colin and I met during our Pope Francis voter tour, Deacon Sia Barbara Camara. She actually was one of the founding members of SNCC and went on to lead Head Start under the Carter administration and is just a fervent civil rights activist here in DC. So she'll be sharing her story with us and talking about the need for reparations. And then I think so many of these questions, I know you're chomping at the bit for the look at the 118th Congress. And that'll be Thursday, March 2nd at 7 p.m., 4 p.m. So the same time as, at least hour as this one. So, and we'll send this all. In the follow-up email that you'll all be receiving, you will get a recording of this and you'll get the links to the voting record itself, a PDF, and also the link to fill out your delivery. And as soon as you fill out that delivery form, one of the four of us on Grassroots Mobilization right now will get back to you and get you on your way and going for a fabulous drop-off. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of my colleagues tonight for joining, and to Eilish and Colin for running tech. And our comms team. Without them, we wouldn't even have a beautifully published voting record or a website or even these slides that you've been looking at. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.